Hello, everyone. My name's Martin Bose. I am the co-host of the On the Fly podcast, and we want to welcome you to this exciting new opportunity for sharing casual conversations around coaching youth lacrosse. I'll be joined by my co-host, Joey Picard, and we both have a long history of coaching and teaching this game that we're so passionate about, and we wanted to make something particular for youth lacrosse coaches, administrators, and families. This podcast is powered by Massachusetts Youth Lacrosse, and we're excited to share this content with you each and every week. Enjoy.
Welcome to On the Fly. This is a podcast for youth coaches and the many facets of the journey that we may face, planned or unplanned. We are excited to be joined by an amazing guest we're thrilled to introduce, and this week's topic is emotional intelligence. Simply put, emotional intelligence is the ability to read people, yourself or others, especially emotions, feelings, what's in their minds, what's in their hearts, and in a team setting, which we're all familiar with, to help manage them. And of course, a huge part of emotional intelligence, sometimes referred to as EQ, and I think we're going to call it that for the duration of this episode, is your ability to understand and manage your own emotions as a coach, which we'll talk about as well. Martin, Chris, in previous episodes, we talked about the many roles of a coach, including teacher, mentor, strategist, planner. Now, we're adding child psychologist to the ever-growing list. And I'm only half joking, of course. No volunteer youth coach is expected to be a clinical psychologist. But how much responsibility is it of ours to understand the EQ and to strategize around it, capitalize from the highs, mitigate the lows? And for those of us coaching middle schoolers, to help weather the storm that is adolescence. So let's jump in. And I want to start by introducing our guest, Chris Gugino. Chris, we're going to ask you to give a 20-second bio. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I have an icebreaker as well, but I just want to encourage people to look at a mini episode that we put on our playlist, which is a more in-depth conversation with Chris, who's going to be a frequent guest of ours. Great story, great ambassador for the game. So we're going to have you give us the Cliff Notes version, Chris, but please come back and watch us. So let's start with your bio.
I'll give you the quick one, Joey. So my name's Chris Gugino. Live here in Massachusetts now, but born and raised in Connecticut. Been playing the game since I was 8 years old. Went to Endicott College, where graduated in 2011, and been coaching with MYL since I graduated college. Since going back and coached back at Endicott, my alma mater, and just so grateful to be passionately involved with MYL, growing the game here in our great state.
We're thrilled to have you. I mean, everyone's that's been around you's been made better because of it. Here's my icebreaker, and we're all going to answer it. When does a youth athlete perform at his or her best? Chris, you start. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think performing at their best, I was thinking about this as we came to this episode, they have to know that if they make a mistake, that the threshold to that, if I make a mistake, what will the repercussions be? And the fact is, there can't be any. They need to know that mistakes can happen, that they're allowed to make mistakes, that their coach is going to help them understand how they can grow from them. But mistakes have to happen. So safety is the word I'll use there, but mistakes, creating mistake rituals, and really making sure that kids know that making mistakes is a part of the game, and we want them to make mistakes because that's when creativity really comes into play.
Martin, what's your answer to that?
My belief is that an athlete will play their best when they feel, I'll use the word safe, and I'll use the word vulnerable. When they feel safe to be vulnerable, it's a very similar answer to you, Chris. If an athlete can go full speed, make a mistake, and then continue giving full effort, they will find their best and maintain their best in an environment where that's encouraged. So I almost encourage coaches to encourage mistakes. Like, we should be getting excited when mistakes happen. Those are our learning moments. And it seems like an ironic concept. Well, I thought we were talking about playing our best. Why are we talking about making mistakes? Because anyone who's made it to the high level or helped others improve knows mistakes are the avenue to growth and higher levels of execution. So encouraging vulnerability is what I try to preach.
Great answers. I think you both nailed it. I don't even think I have to add to it other than I'm going to say that I think a youth athlete performs at their best when there's not a sleepover the night before. Is that not the worst thing, that you get an email from the mom saying,
No,
"Hey,
it's so
where am
funny.
I supposed to be? Because I have Jack and Jimmy and Vinny and Tommy and Louie, and they're going to have a sleepover. And don't worry, they're not going to eat pizza bagel bites and Coke until 2 o'clock in the morning."
Yep.
Oh, that drives me nuts. But I'm kidding, of course. You guys absolutely killed it. I think what we're trying to say is they need to be in the right mental space. And that is a perfect segue for us to talk about EQ, emotional intelligence, us recognizing what that is and how we have the authority, the capability, the responsibility to shape that environment for them. That's on the coach for sure. So let's get back to defining it and exemplifying this a little bit more. So Martin, how would you explain it? I gave my definition
Sure.
of emotional intelligence. How can we qualify or quantify EQ in a person, specifically a youth athlete?
So I'll start by zooming out a little bit and give coaches an insight about how I tend to evaluate players. And it goes into these 4 columns. One column would be athleticism, your size, speed, strength, quickness. Second column would be skill. I don't tend to say, oh, here's their weak-handed skill set versus their strong-handed. It's all kind of blended into skill. 2 columns there. Third column is IQ, lacrosse IQ. So that can be defined as decision making, situational awareness, understanding if this is the scenario, here's my best options. Obviously, that comes with time. And then lastly, EQ, emotional intelligence. And I'd like to back out because I think it's such an important thing to understand that this category, in comparison to the others, is actually the most important, in my opinion. If an example of someone who's got tons of skill and athleticism, but they really, really are not paying attention, and they, bother other players, and they get super, super angry anytime they make a mistake, and they blame other kids. That's not helpful. So the skill in and of itself becomes less valuable because the EQ is dragging them down. And so I just like to back up a little bit, because in the context of all the skills that we could be working on and teaching at our practices, EQ might be the most important and hardest to teach, ironically, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it looks like hustle plays. It looks like being a good listener. It looks like being a good teammate. It looks like having the ability to make mistakes and not get super down on themselves or blame others and get angry. And so it's this kind of fluid thing that on one given day, an athlete may be dipping low, or on a given day, an athlete may have a great EQ. And so it tends to be something that's very dynamic and fluid. So we have to keep our senses attuned to how these things are shifting and ebbing and flowing on a day-to-day, week-to-week, even drill to drill basis. Okay. So I know it's not quite a simple answer, but to me, if I were to really hone in on the positive aspects, I'm looking for those hustle plays. I'm looking for those kids that can really avoid distractions and listen, and not to say that they're perfect all the time, but that they take criticism. They can get coached without taking it personally. That's a form of emotional intelligence.
So let me ask it in this way, because I'm fascinated by the concept of you marking it as part of like an evaluation or a tryout. Do you need some sort of a baseline? I mean, it's probably easier to track the fluidity of a player over the course of several practices and games as you get to know them. But how do you make a snap judgment on a player about their EQ based on maybe a 90-minute tryout?
It's a great question, and this is something I have a lot of experience with, whether it's helping out a select tryout or a club tryout. And it's something that I also changed the way that I do this over the years, where, let's say I'm working on a scale of 1 to 5. If I see a kid not trying hard and I'm going, I guess they're a 2, it's like, no, it's too complicated. I can't put a number value to it. So what I ended up doing is, when I see these high or low EQ moments, I'm making a plus mark or a minus mark within the EQ column, so that I can start to see if I have multiple players within a similar skill set and a similar level of athleticism and a similar level of IQ, but one of those players is very clearly listening more, and they keep making hustle plays, and when they make mistakes, they continue to give effort afterwards. they're going to have multiple plus signals next to their name. And the kids that are going palms up when they, get mad at their teammate for not catching the ball and they're not paying attention. So I have a couple minus marks next to their EQ. So I'm not necessarily trying to say, oh, this is your level, like I might with the skill and the athleticism for that day. It's more so I've seen some good moments. Oh, I've seen some bad moments, and that can help me get a bigger picture as I review.
Well, that's fascinating, isn't that, Chris?
I love it. And it's easy to pick out the players who are a challenge to be coached. Now, we can get into the pieces of why that may be down the line, but I think one of the barriers to being able to play a team sport is, hey, you got to be willing to be coached. So you talk about a baseline there. Being willing and able to be coached is that baseline. How players can level up or level down is exactly what Marty's talking about.
So the whole point behind this podcast, there's casual conversations that we're having, but we want this to be practical. We want this to be a resource and a tool for a coach to listen to and say, all right, I'm going to be faced with this. I'm going to be faced with kids who are frustrated, they're angry, or the opposite, they're elated, they're manic after something goes well. My job as the coach is to kind of manage that and to have a coaching style. So this question is for both of you, all of us really, but is there a one-size-fits-all strategy? Because all these kids might have different manifestations of this EQ and their reaction to things, or do you have to cater it based on different emotions, different kids?
What I was thinking about when Marty was talking is, especially at the youth level, we set the standard, and we talk about all the time visioning the coach who's coming from work, coming from place X, Y, or Z, and we're busy, right? Coaching is a volunteer position, especially at the youth level. And how do we arrive at that field, at that right level that we need to be, because we have to set the standard? I can remember so many practices that have gone poorly because I came in at a bad level and the players met me where I was at. I was maybe quick to call someone out. I was maybe too quick to blow the whistle, too quick to bring everyone and say, we're not giving the effort, as opposed to taking a step back, taking a breath and saying, hey, I'm the standard. I need to make sure I am arriving in the right way, because it just quickly emanates down.
Yeah, just to speak to that, one of the most common issues I see is coaches go right into evaluation of the skill, the EQ, and everything when we haven't done that self-reflection. And I think you're speaking to that. It's a level of accountability as a coach, knowing the environment that I'm projecting is going to get absorbed. And that is the first thing that they unconsciously notice. And for us to have that priority, how is my energy level? How is my capacity to handle the chaos that's about to be this youth lacrosse practice? And what are my strategies, though, before I pop out of my car and start interacting with parents and maybe getting the kids who are there early to start playing catch and whatnot, setting up my first stations, however your process goes. What are those interjections that we can utilize to transition accordingly? And this is such a common thing in life, coming from work to home life. Before we walk through that door, are we bringing those stresses and those burdens with us? It's something that we all struggle with, I'm sure, at different phases of our career. And this is no different. So to piggyback on what you just said, having that accountability to check in on my own EQ and check in on my own energy and creating some rituals, I'll call it, so that when I step onto that field, I'm giving myself the best chance of success. I'd also like to make one more point, which is when you think about approaching your group in the context of EQ, there's a level of buy-in from your group that you're going to start to hone into. And sometimes this has nothing to do with who your best players are. So let's, as an example, say you have 20 kids on your team. You probably have 5 players that are the most bought in. They listen, they work hard, they're coachable. Sometimes they're the best players, sometimes they're not. You've got 5 other players that are your least bought in. They really mess with your lines. They mess around. They don't listen, and they cause problems. it can be an issue for coaches to spend our time giving attention to that top five and that bottom five. We love coaching that top five. Mm-hmm. They're so fun to coach. We get frustrated so easily with that bottom five. Yeah. They're so good at taking our attention, and that middle group can get left behind. So what I try to do is, you have to let your season start to progress before you really understand who is the most and least bought in. But even with one practice, you'll start to get a vibe. And I just encourage coaches, don't let that middle group go under your radar. If you can get that middle group a little more bought in, there has a ripple effect that bottom five might start to get positively affected.
So what I'm hearing, to kind of recap this, is before we can even attempt to figure out and understand the emotions of the players we have to first understand ourselves. We have to understand our own EQ and what triggers us. So what are some, let's just say, we've all been there. Chris, you alluded to it. So did you, Marty. Bad day at work, long commute, your energy is low. You know that you need to be a better version of yourself for the kids to have a fighting chance. So before you get to that practice, you're sitting in the car, before you pick up that whistle, what are some strategies? What are some coping mechanisms, whatever you want to call it, to kind of put yourself in that right space so you can be the best coach you can be that day?
What I know well about myself, and Marty will laugh, is when I'm at my best, I am actively involved in participating in practice. So setting the level from the start. If I come in low energy, that's a problem, which is very seldom happens with me. But being actively involved, engaging, getting the stick in my hand, the second practice starts, the second I hit the field, that's what connects me there, right? Where I'm here, I'm connecting with whoever's there, get a ball, have a toss. That's how I arrive at practice, and that just sets the energy level for me. Because at the youth level, again, college level, high school is totally different. The youth level, where we arrive, how we come with our energy is so important. Got to arrive, bring the energy right away, and just get involved.
Yeah. Love it. I'll give two answers to this. One is essentially a mini meditation practice. It's called 2 feet, 1 breath. And so this has some Native American roots, which is relevant for our sport and can be really, really profoundly helpful and just so simple. So 2 feet, 1 breath, we can try it right now. Starts with feeling your feet touch the ground. And so before I ask you to really do this, you can start to do it, try to feel your feet touch the ground. But I want you to understand conceptually, there's a difference between feeling the sensations of your feet touching the ground and any thoughts you have about it. So part of that is learning how to separate, oh, that's a thought, from, oh, I can feel the tingling of my feet touching the ground. I can feel the heat or the hardness or the coolness or the softness. It doesn't have to be a certain way, but when you feel the sensation, that's a different focus than I'm thinking it's this way or I think I'm doing it, right? These are thoughts that we're going to have. 2 feet, you're feeling your feet touch the ground. 1 breath. You're just going to consciously take an inhale through your nose. You can let it out through your nose or your mouth. And it's just a grounding practice to arrive in the here and now. That's 1. 2 is one of the most studied ways to de-stress your nervous system as in a very efficient way. It's called a physiological sigh. This is how it goes. You take a large inhale through your nose, and then another inhale through your nose, and then let it all out through the mouth. And extend that exhale as long as it needs to be. Don't rush it, but make it nice and easy. And you can do another rep of that. You can do 2 to 3 repetitions of this physiological sigh. What's cool about that technique is we all as humans naturally do it every 7 to 10 minutes of our whole life. It might just a sigh. It happens all the time. Maybe you don't notice it all the time, but sometimes you just doing something, you just, right? Sometimes it goes just in and out through the mouth. It happens often, but if we trigger it, it is a de-stressing tool and it's incredibly effective. So I'm in the car, I had a stressful day at work. Just to combine those two, let me feel my feet touching what's underneath me. Maybe it's my car floor, maybe it's the ground itself. Let me just connect with my breath. And then let me do another breath where I really fill up my lungs. 2 inhales through the nose, a nice long exhale through the mouth can be a really practical tool for anyone especially coaches about to go deal with a bunch of screaming kids.
Those are outstanding, and I think that they are sure to work. But if they don't, how important is it to have people that you know and trust and believe in with you as your assistant coaches, who you can come up to and confidently say, you got to lift me up today. I'm not having it. I'm trying. I did 2 feet, 1 breath, and I'm just still, I'm in a funk today. So could you lead the warm-ups, and I'll get there by the time we get to our water break.
Yeah, there's obviously value in that. And I think having that might be a luxury. And before we get to like utilizing that and maybe developing that, I just want to point out what you just did is you set the standard of encouraging vulnerability without saying, yeah, everyone, we need to be vulnerable. You just went out and said, I need a little something today. And that is an active use of vulnerability in a really practical way. And I would encourage any coach to be real, be authentic. It's so powerful when someone else is receiving a request for help from you. You guys just bonded. You guys just created a level of trust. And I think more times than not, you'll get a positive response from that coach, and that might even create an energy burst. So props to you, coach. It's a great example. And I would encourage many coaches, if that's your truth that day, be real about it. Don't just push through, because that's how we end up burning out. And then ultimately we and the kids will suffer. And so to directly answer your question, if you've got the ability to have an assistant coach with you, let's make sure that we're building that relationship and that we're empowering them, because this is going to happen. There's 0% chance you're going to show up to every practice full of energy. It's not possible. We're going to ebb and flow with our seasons. So I would encourage any coach to again be authentic, and then also let's build those relationships with our fellow coaches, because we're going to need them.
We can revisit coach reflection, self, the adults, but let's flip it a little bit and talk a little bit about the youth athlete. And this is, all of us, but Chris, I'm going to start with you on this one. In your experience working with the youth athletes, what are some of the most common emotions that can impact a practice or a game, good, bad, neutral, that coaches can expect to see frequently if they're kind of new to this, maybe?
We briefly interrupt this episode to remind you all about the New England Youth Lacrosse Convention. This upcoming convention is the 4th annual. We'll be hosting at Gillette Stadium, and we're super excited. The date for that is February 1st, and we'll be welcoming coaches from all around the country with tons of different speakers and vendors joining us. We hope you'll join us too. Please check out the Instagram page for more information and to gather tickets as well. That's NE Youth LaxCon on Instagram. One more time, that's NE Youth LaxCon on Instagram. Hope to see you there.
I think one of the most challenging emotions to deal with is frustration. And frustration happens with our best athletes in the way of skill, but also happens with those most commonly who are new to the game. Learning the skill of passing, catching, cradling is not easy. And what we find is as we get through older age groups, we still want to bring kids into the game. So being able to teach that skill to a 10-year-old who's playing lacrosse for the first time, a lot of kids have been playing for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. You get this skill spectrum, and that player who's learning how to cradle, pass, and catch, I need to be able to teach that player the same way I teach the player who's been playing lacrosse for 6 years. And how do I meet them in the middle, knowing that the player who's just learning is going to have a degree of frustration because they can't do it yet. But the player who's more advanced is going to have a frustration because he's learning how to pass and catch. So as a coach, how do I set the standard where you can never go through the fundamentals enough? Dead fact. As a 36-year-old, I still go through the fundamentals. I get better every time I teach coach education because I teach myself the fundamentals again. We need to reinforce that in our players as well. So the frustration of that player that's more skilled, giving them the opportunity. This is a challenge. So identifying that, giving them that leadership opportunity to help those players who are learning, giving them the challenge to say, do it with your offhand, do it with one hand. Don't drop the ball in between all your reps. And that player who's at that learning level, making sure that they know that you don't have an expectation of them, that you have to get this right away, and then giving them that time and attention to meet them where they're at, so you can quell the frustration. Because when you're frustrated playing the game of lacrosse, it does not come easy. It is a game of flow. It's a game of light hands. It's a game that requires a bit of a step back and gripping the stick. So I think frustration is one of the things that I see the most often, and it can express itself in different ways throughout the season as well, where we're frustrated with player doing X, frustrated that we're losing the game. As a coach, right, seeing that frustration, how do we meet our players where we're at and shoot a line straight through it?
So what and besides frustration? We see that a lot.
I think sometimes you will get aloofness. Aloofness is one of those things, right? And Marty and I were lamenting about some funny practices with some really young gun kids the other day, where they're out picking daisies, and you're trying to reel this one kid in, and that's going to happen, right? And that aloofness is okay. It's a reality of practice, and then you could have that intensity on the other side too. So I like to live and show things in spectrums, because as a coach, you're going to see all of it. And if you can see that player, and how do I pull them back in? How do I excite them to get back into this? And that player who's a bit excitable, a bit too intense, how do we dial them back to bring them back to that practice, bring them back to the intent of what we're trying to do?
Sure. And that can lead to frustration when the coach, you're trying to work everyone touched the ball once, let's get it around, trigger a play, and one kid sitting crisscross applecross at midfield, right? Picking those dandelions.
Oh,
that's not part of the scheme. What are we doing here? Marty, what else do you see?
Yeah, I think of just reframing. I think frustration is the right word, and I think maybe right next to that is disappointment. The kid that's disappointed, and this is so common because mistakes are so common. So you're going to get those just frustration, disappointed, like the emotions might turn to anger, maybe even sadness from there. But I think it stems from like they really wanted to make that catch and they didn't. And I tend to take this approach that people are very confused by, at least the kids are initially like, what is this coach talking about? Where a mistake will happen, they're upset, and I get in their face like, nice job, you freaking dropped that, like, let's go. And if I can, nice cut, you worked over there to get open, and then you made eye contact with the person, whether they drop it or not, I can encourage that. And they're usually confused by why is this coach excited I just made this mistake? And then I can guide them back into either trying to correct the technique or just being like, look, that's going to happen. I want you to keep cutting, and let's get right back into the drill and just get, movement, getting right back in. And then there's a sort of a higher level concept of trying to move away from expectation and move into standards. If there is an expectation, it's that you're going to make mistakes. Right. So if I have the ability of like, my standard is that I work hard to get open, I make eye contact with the ball carrier, I try to watch the ball into my stick. It's so much easier to be like, oh, I dropped it, I'm going to go try to get it now, in that mindset, than like, I'm supposed to catch this, when ultimately that result, I could get checked as there's so many things that could happen. Goalies can appreciate that, right? Like them stepping to the ball and driving their top hand to the ball is what gets them the save. Right. And so if they're focusing on those behaviors, that's going to breed the better result in the long run, right? So that's one. And then one thing that wasn't mentioned that you see a lot, I'll call it timidness. It's a lack of confidence. Maybe it's not the aloof player, maybe it's not the disappointed player, maybe it's someone who's just, they're built into their personality. They're not super assertive at this phase in their life. And so when we see those kids that are always creeping to the back of the line, or like you can just see it in the body language of like, oh, I'm really not sure what I'm supposed to do. Those are typically kids that will not respond well to, hey, Joey, come on, get to the front of the line. Like, what are you doing? Where other kids can see it. I tend to find a positive response happens when I'm very subtle about that interaction. And I'm not even going to call out, hey, I notice that you don't want to be in the front of the line. I'm just going to go up and say, I am so glad that you're at practice right now. I don't care what happens on this next rep. Let me just see you run hard, and just give them something specific and usually effort oriented to work towards on that next rep.
Love that.
Those are great strategies. Chris, what do you do when you have a kid frustrated, angry, disappointed? And all that kind of stems, by the way, from I'm letting my team down, I'm letting myself down. I think
Mm.
that's where the doubts kind of creep up in them, and it manifests itself in different ways. But how do you address that?
Yeah, when you talk about this, Joey, like my head starts to dart to all these different players I've coached.
Yeah.
And you think about how do I connect and get to know all my players individually? Because if I know them all well, which is your job as a coach, knowing your players well, you're going to know when they're on. You're going to know when they're off. You're going to know what drives them. Marty's talking about that kid who goes to the back of the line. How do you reward the effort? How do you show them getting from just A to B, not the result, is what matters here? And that player who, on the other side of it, is your maybe more skilled player. How do we make sure that that player is coached the same way? Like you're understanding what drives your players, and that's like a baseline coach level, understanding what drives them. Certainly we set the standard, but that standard, like Marty's saying, it's going to be here and here for each player based on who they are and what drives them and how they're empowered to succeed on the field. Right? I can remember specific situations where you're my most skilled player, the kid who's always out in front and setting the pace and loves the game and is always communicating with teammates. It's like crying on the sideline, and you're asking yourself, you're like, holy, what happened, right? You're nervous, you're confused, you don't know what's going on, but I think about that moment as a coach, and how do you walk up to that player, meet them at their level, and say, hey, what's going on? Hey, like I'm here for you. And to hear from them that maybe they're just upset about making a mistake. Maybe they had a really hard day. Maybe they're not feeling well. And these are those little things where you come down and meet them at their level. You're going to figure out what drives your players. And again, the standard's there, but being able to meet your kids where they're at is what matters the most.
I want to talk about the positive emotions that we can see and what we can do, but another negative one that kind of comes about, and it's very similar. It's frustration and it's anger, but rather than stemming from, oh, I made a mistake and letting myself down, letting the team down, it's the injustice of something else, a bad call by a referee, the other team burned them and did something that someone else did that they can't handle well. So we see, especially in games, we see that frustration and anger come out that way. So how would either of you address that kind of toxicity in a player, like a slash call that the player didn't feel was warranted?
Oh, I've seen this way too much. And I think this is one of those pieces that is a team culture, coach culture thing from the start. I'm by design an excitable person. And on the sideline, as a coach, you need to check yourself way more than you think, because you are not a spectator, you are not an athlete, you're a coach. And all eyes on the sideline, all eyes on the far sideline are looking at you and hearing you. So the biggest piece, and again, this always just brings me back to lots of games where I've made the mistake of reacting. Games where I've made the mistake of reacting, just maybe saying, oh, palms up. The team immediately jumps on that, and they're right in that vein with you. It's hard to get the team off that vein if you are on it, to shift them back. So
because you just gave them permission to act that way.
Totally. It's the standard that I set for myself and as the team is you got to control the controllables. You don't control the refs. You don't control the weather. You don't control the other color jersey the team's wearing if you had to flip your jersey color. So this is one of those ones where as a coach, the way you react matters way, way, way more. If those players are then going to deviate from that standard and being continuing to react, we need to not provide repercussions, but we need to be then able to meet that player where they're at and have those conversations about why this is unacceptable.
Right. I don't know if either of you have ever done this. Marty, I'll let you answer that, but I just wanted to throw in one thing that I like to do is we'll scrimmage, every so often, inter-squad scrimmage. I will officiate it. I will purposefully make bad calls.
Yeah.
I absolutely have a kid 2 feet out of bounds and I just let it play on or give it to the other ball to see how they react and to use that as a lesson. Let's get this out of the way at practice and talk about drop the ball, get back, make up for it again. We're going to get some calls. We're going to give some calls. And I don't know, have any of you ever done anything like that?
Oh yeah, totally. It's like you think about that. It's like as a coach, you just do it, right?
Yeah.
But I love that. Way to call that out, Joey.
Yeah. Marty, what were you going to say?
I see it with bad calls from referees, and I also see it, I think, cut a little deeper for certain kids when someone, particularly in games, someone from the other team does something that either directly harms them or in some instances harms their teammate. And it brings up all these emotions in any human, especially for a young developing mind. They can't fathom why someone else would act that way, and it can throw them all out of whack. I'm picturing a kid on the sideline that is just beside themselves, and maybe they're crying or maybe they're just like kind of shutting down. And in some cases, it's less important to figure out what caused them to be in that state. And to Chris's points that he's made, having the ability to connect with them and having the trusting relationship that they feel comfortable me being in their personal bubble, that has to be there. And having a conversation essentially about what is controllable versus what is not controllable. And it's like, it's so easy to just say that. I like laugh to myself because a bad call gets made and people freak out on the sideline and a coach goes, don't worry about what you can't control. And it's like, yeah, like that's right. But how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And there's no simple answer to it, but I see this a lot with youth kids, and actually as the kids that care more are the ones that this continues to happen to. And it's got to start with the relationship. And as far as strategies and how to mitigate it, I don't want to necessarily mitigate it, but every time, if it continues to happen to the same kid over and over, that's a reflection of my inability to connect with that kid and figure out what can be a strategy for that one kid so that when he experiences this emotion, we can start to come back. So it's not necessarily a super practical answer, but I would just encourage coaches to understand that you're going to get kids that are upset about things that are way out of their control. And let's find different ways to communicate about controlling what you can control other than just saying that phrase.
Right.
Yeah. Marty, have you heard of this concept called red hat, blue hat?
I haven't.
Is that where they see different things on either side of the hat?
I'm gonna blank on the name of the book, but it's about there's this book that's about the All Blacks, the rugby team, and one of the concepts they talk about as players and coaches is blue hat, red hat, and you never want to be a red hat guy because when you're red, you see red. You're angry, you're emotional, you're making mistakes on the field. Mistakes are compounding after one another, and a lot of times I think about it. How is my team reacting? Is my team being red hat right now? Are they being red hat and reacting to a call in the field? Because just like that, I need to be able to swing them back. So I've got to be the calm, cool, collected guy. So there's benefits and downfalls to both of them because at the same time, if you're losing by 5 goals, the other team's going on a run and they don't have the emotion, the fire to inspire themselves, as a coach, how can you meet them with not the red hat negative energy, but the red hat energy to pull them, right? To inspire them to quell this run, to enter back into this game. Lacrosse is such a game of runs, and being able to meet your team where they're at based on where their energy is something that I learned. And once you start to think about it that way, you're like, oh, okay, how do I need to respond? If they're reacting, my team's reacting, I cannot be at the same level with any energy that I provide.
Flipping the script a little bit, what are some of the positive emotions we see that we as coaches can kind of capture and find a way to make that contagious and lift your practice up based on a couple of kids who are emoting in a way that's going to allow you to perform better? What do we see emotion-wise?
A couple things pop for me. It's like whenever I think about the kid I love to have in a team, I think about the kid who's not just doing the right things himself, but is helping his teammates get better, is helping coach that player, is saying, I'm big on run to the end of the line, right? Encouraging the other player to finish out that rep and making sure that they're giving their best effort. So like those are those things that you love to see as a coach, right? That kid, you're like, oh, I love coaching that kid. But the way that that kid takes it to the next level, it's not just them as an individual. It's how do I inspire my teammate? How do I lift up that player on our team who's still developing?
Mm-hmm.
I think the word I would use is woo, a woo kid, right? The kid who you would say, woo, like that's my guy, right? That's the kind of kid you want in your team. But it's one who wants to be a leader and is one who can kind of take the look outside of themselves to their teammates too.
And I think there's a difference between I'm exhibiting these characteristics and behaviors that coaches are going to be like, way to go. And then also my peers, like I'm trying to have my peers say, way to go. So one of the things that we do at the end of my practice with my 5th grade group is each of our coaches will pick one player that we thought had a great practice, set good goals and met it, and great effort, great energy. They will turn around and name one of their peers and why they did
Awesome.
something that impressed them. And all of a sudden, their eyes light up twice as wide as then when I give out, best kid at the day award. When it comes from their teammates, it means more. And so all of a sudden you see that spark and that contagion happen, and they're starting to out hustle each other. They're starting to say, great job, great effort, the way they communicate with one another. And it really does turn it into a cohesive team effort. And it's not necessarily about the results, it's about the process together.
This is the Ed McCarthy catch him doing things great.
Exactly. And then, but you got to notice it. You got to call it out too. You can't just
yeah.
observe it. You got to say so, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I'll add in 2 things. One is I'm looking for joy. And sometimes that's married to effort. You see the person that's just really trying so hard to go after that ground ball. And they're like, I'm just like looking for smiles. I'm looking for joy. And I think you can also find joy in the kid that's like, whatever, doing wet willies in the back of the line or whatever. And maybe that's a strategy of like, hey, I love that you're having fun right now. Let's divert that energy this way. But when I can see joy within the drill or the game, and either call it out in real time of like, look how much fun they're having, or like, waiting until it's done and saying, I can see you smiling. Keep it up. Like, keep having fun with that. That can be contagious and have a positive ripple effect. And the other thing I'm looking for, this is a big one. Who is celebrating others' victories?
Mm-hmm.
And you're sort of training it with that method you have there, Coach Joey, of really having that conversation at the end of practice can bring that out. And some kids just naturally do it. Like when their kid scores a goal, like when their friend scores a goal, usually it's someone they're close with. They like, yeah, and they like, and so like we can encourage that by either saying something in real time or mentioning, hey, I noticed that this person celebrated this person, and let's have more of that. Even, this is how we can get to know each other even better. And how awesome would it be if every, positive play that happens, we've got our whole bench cheering. This is going to create a whole new level of experience for all of you. And let's try to prioritize that.
Yeah, 100%. And combine those joy, but joy for others, right?
That's right. I think who's the fresh PLO player? Is it CJ Kirst, the youngest brother there from Cornell?
Yep.
And that's what his coaches talk about. He celebrates others' goals more than his own. What better role model for these young kids than someone like that? I think that's fantastic.
And he's the all-time leading NCAA goal scorer, right?
Yeah. So I feel like we could do like 3 whole episodes on this, and I know that we'll pepper these kind of conversations in throughout, but just to kind of put a wrap on it, before we get to our Q&A, we have some questions we're going to answer. Final thoughts here on putting a bow on this. Marty, we'll start with you.
I will say to remember that not every kid really wants to be there. When I have the expectation as a coach that every one of these kids are going to show up and work hard and listen to me, I am naive. Some of these kids are doing this because it's just the activity that their parents pick for them for the spring, and that's okay. And so as we're putting things in the context of emotional intelligence, as I enter the the coaching field from my car. I did my 2 feet, 1 breath, and I did my physiological sigh, and I'm here and I'm excited and I'm ready to go. To have that thought and remember, like, some of these kids need to be encouraged to even want to be here. And that's a challenge I get to accept as a
Yeah.
coach. And so remember that. And that can make your job easier. And it's a little less frustrating when you see the kids that are messing around and not really paying attention. It's like, well, that actually makes a lot of sense. And so this is my challenge. And I accept that as a youth lacrosse coach.
I think
Chris.
for me, the coaching fundamentally now, coaching of the past is very different. A lot of yelling. But coaching today, a lot of yelling, a lot of sprints, right? But coaching today, I think is 2 words. It's love and accountability. And at any level, professional down to the youngest players we coach, is love and accountability. You gotta love your players, right? That's loving each and every one of them. They're showing up, they're giving their effort. But accountability, we're here to play a sport, right? There is a level of accountability to help you grow and develop that I have to have and give to you. And again, it's on a spectrum. So some players you got to give a lot more love to solicit the effort. Some players you got to push the accountability to help them grow. So it's love and accountability.
I think you both absolutely nailed it. It's everything we asked for. I'm going to throw in one final thing, which I honest to God think is the answer to everything, and that's conditioning and reps. And the more you rep and the more you program everything that you do at practice, it's going to come into the game, and it's just going to be there for them as not necessarily a crutch, but it's just part of their DNA. And so the reason I'm mentioning that is, we talk about like the emotions before a game. You're excited, you're nervous, you had a frustrating week of practice, you're angry, you're riding high, you're manic, whatever it might be. We all know as athletes, once that whistle starts, once you complete your first pass, once you make that first shot, once you get that first defensive check on your arm, those emotions tend to kind of evaporate in the background. And then you just kind of trust all of the muscle memory and all of the programming that you've done at practice. And it's never easy, but it just becomes second nature and you're not thinking about it anymore. So as a coach, I wouldn't worry so much. This is an important topic. And I would come into it saying, I have to be on the lookout for EQ. I have to know it. I have to have some tactics and skills. But if I can absolutely focus on reps, that is going to translate into success through confidence by just repping the hell out of it. And I think 10 million reps is the answer to every problem that we're going to have, in my very humble opinion.
I love it.
So what we usually do is we're going to have some live shows we're really excited about, and we're going to get some questions from coaches in real time. But some like this one are pre-recorded, and so we've asked for topic questions from some youth coaches in advance. So I have a few here I'm going to read, and this is for all of us to answer. We got some good ones today on the subject of emotional intelligence. Here's the first one. We all have those kids who are an emotional brick wall. They don't seem fazed, no outbursts, they're hard to read. But what are some signs we may look for that things aren't going well for them?
I think the player who's not involved, who maybe isn't making eye contact, who really isn't giving the effort and is maybe seeming like they don't want to be there. Now, that could be a player who doesn't want to be there, is maybe being forced to be there. But at times, and more often than you think, there's a point of connection that you can make with that player to meet them at their level, right? I talk about getting on a knee, eye to eye with these players. It's sometimes a challenge as a coach when you have a practice plan that you want to execute. However, at times, you've got to meet that individual player where they're at because they're just having a tough time. So that's what I would say is those players that are a brick wall, there's a reason for it, and our opportunity to be able to meet them where they're at.
My answer to that is, in one word, eyes. It's in the eyes. We as humans get really good at learning how to seem okay with our body language and keeping a neutral face or maybe even a little smirk on. Our mouth is very good at lying in more ways than one. But when you really make eye contact with someone, you can see where they're at. And so to reiterate what Chris just said, getting on their level is both literal and figurative. Literally making eye contact where you are at the same level has a profound effect for human and human connection. By standing over someone and looking down at them, just because you're taller than them, can cause a player to shut down further. And so, what am I looking for? I'm looking for eyes and head down. That is the go-to unconscious behavior that happens when we're down and out. Our eyes and our head go down. And so, by making eye contact on the same level, we get to see, is this really where they're at? Are they just looking at the dandelions, or are they really off today? And let's let them know that I'm here for them. I don't need to fix the issue. I don't need to get them excited right now. I don't need to solve whatever problem they think they're going through. But them knowing that they have a stable and caring adult that is letting them know that they're there can be profoundly positively beneficial.
Super helpful advice there. Here's one tough one, and I like that it's being asked. While we can see some emotions and attitudes and behaviors that are directly the result of performance or things that happen on the field, sometimes we see uncharacteristic behavior because of issues off the field. Maybe things at home, things at school, other sports, something in the neighborhood. What is our responsibility as coaches to address those? Is there a line from behind which we mind our business? And if so, where is it?
This is where I think having a relationship with the parents matters a lot, and understanding, because lacrosse for a lot of kids can be a privilege, right? And sports can be a privilege. And I can recall some specific players on teams in the past, youth teams, where something was going on, be it at school, be it at home, and they were allowed to show up to practice, but they couldn't participate. So, at times it's understanding what's going on. It helps you understand your players more, but being able to flex and understand how does that need to play into the game here as well. So it's not to make kids feel bad, but like your job as a coach is to coach. It's not to then be the one to discipline in that way if something's happening outside of the field. You want to understand, and if there's something that is leading to them lashing out, being an ear for them. But our job is to take that direction with the parents in a lot of ways.
What a great answer. And I think it's so important to recognize that there's lots of, but one of the big differences between a youth player and a high school player is the coach relationship with the parents. A lot of times high school coaches will say, I don't really want to talk to the parents unless we're fundraising to get us an extra assistant coach. Outside of that, I want the player to talk to me, but that's not the case with third and fourth graders. That's not the case even with seventh and eighth graders. These are still kids. So having that relationship where you can say, I'm noticing something's off here. Is there something I need to know? Is there something I can help with? If not, okay, hands off. But, please let, exactly as you said, like we're here for them. And this is not just a privilege for some. For some, this is an escape. Right? For some, they can't wait to get to lacrosse because all of that distraction is behind them. And this comes back to the beginning of this episode when you talked about the coach has to be in the right mindset. We have to be at our best for these kids because this kid's relying on these 75 minutes for whatever other nonsense going on at school and at home.
Oh, yeah.
I think it can be helpful for the coach to, not every single day, but periodically say things at the beginning of practice like, hey, all that stuff that happened at school today, anything that was bothering you yesterday, anything you're worried about tomorrow, for the next 60, 75 minutes, let's just play lacrosse. Let's just have fun out here. And so that can be a good trigger, but I also want to put it in the context of like, if something really is affecting a player and it's being brought onto their body language, onto the practice field or the game field, that's also okay. We're not saying that you have to check out of everything else. What I would say is, can we go up to that player and say, I can tell you're a little off today. Do me a favor. Let's just try hard for this next drill. And we're going to talk afterwards. And I want to make sure you know that I'm here for you. And I think there's a maturity level. I don't know that I can have that conversation with a second grader, maybe a fourth or fifth grader, but you're going to notice the body language regardless. And so, sometimes you can preface the practice or a drill. I can tell you guys are thinking about other things. Let's bring it back to the here and now. That's half of our job as a youth lacrosse coach. They're always thinking about other things and doing other activities that aren't lacrosse. And so herding the sheep is already built into the job description. And kind of what we're alluding to is being able to understand that when real issues are happening outside of practice, we're a mentor for this group of kids. We are in some sense, a parental figure for some of these kids. And so that needs to be a thought process that we have that we cannot just ignore. So we need to develop a strategy there, and it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be coming from a place of love, like you mentioned, Chris.
Love and accountability, right?
Okay.
Last one's a fun one. Inspirational pep talks, either pre-game speeches, halftime speeches, firing up your players for a big game. Do you speak off the cuff, or do you ever have it pre-planned?
Oh, geez. It's like at the college level, there's a slight degree of pre-planning you have to do, but it's also just very emotional. So it's more off the cuff than you think.
Mm-hmm.
And as a coach and as you know your team, it happens more naturally than you think. If I were to script it, it would be silly. So it's certainly for me, motivation with tonality, motivation with how I'm expressing myself or expressing certain things. But I think Marty had mentioned it earlier, and as a coach, I think this is my biggest motivating factor. Looking your kids in the eyes when you're motivating them. That's it. Like they can sense your energy when you're looking them in the eyes and you are helping them get there.
Marty, how about you? You're in the car a lot. Do you ever in that long commute say, I'm going to practice my speech right here and now?
I don't. I have had coaches that I swear they must have practiced it, because the way that they delivered it, it's just like it can't be off the cuff. So maybe that's something that I'll grow into. I also think for me personally, I'm bouncing around and I'm coaching a bunch of different teams throughout the season. I think there's a different level of situational awareness for a coach that's with their team, in our case, twice a week, and they hear the side conversations of what kids got going on pre and post practice. And so sometimes you can grab things that you can utilize in that pregame environment to motivate. But for me, I tend not to be a super motivational speaker as a coach. I tend to try to keep everyone even keeled, not too high, not too low. And I'm very practical. So I tend to stay away, but maybe that's something I need to, probably definitely something I need to work on as a coach, is like getting the juices flowing. So I'm not the best one to ask about this.
This was a pleasure, gentlemen. This was a fantastic topic. Like I said, we're going to pepper emotional intelligence, EQ, along with IQ and athleticism and everything else throughout all of these, because it's such an important aspect of what we do. I just want to thank both of you, but particularly you, Chris, for joining us. And we can't wait to see more of you in this. We want to thank Matthew Flax for helping to power all of this, especially Aaron Brogan and Kevin Barney, who've been instrumental in getting us up and started and listening. Thank you for all the coaches to support us and tune in. And we really are looking forward to your contributions, your questions, your topic ideas, and your past experiences as well to help all of us grow and be better. So we'll see you next time. This has been On the Fly and a great episode, in my opinion. So thanks, Chris and Marty.
Thank you, Joey.
Thanks, everybody.